Okay, let's just dive right in. If you've ever been through that early, intoxicating phase of romantic love,
That magic.
that magic, exactly, that urgent, gravity-defying feeling that makes everything feel like pure destiny, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
But then you also know the feeling that comes next,
Yeah.
the magic. It fades. And as the years go by, that pure, urgent, head-in-the-clouds intensity, it just gives way to something far quieter.
And we tend to frame that as a loss.
Right. We see it as a personal failing. Maybe we're becoming cynical or
Yeah.
just sad, like we've lost romance. But our sources are pointing to something totally different.
Something much bigger.
What if this isn't a loss at all, but a massive, necessary psychological structural transformation?
And that right there is the core mission of this deep dive. We've been analyzing a stack of material that all suggests the same thing. With maturity, the fundamental sequence of how we understand love, it inverts.
In inverts. How so?
When we're young, the pattern is almost always fantasy first, then reality. We embrace the grand story. We invest everything in that narrative.
But experience flips that script.
Completely. Now it's reality first, which makes fantasy hesitant. The emotional barrier to entry is just exponentially higher, and that hesitation, that's what we're here to explore.
And that hesitation, as we're going to show you, it's not a sign of a hardened heart. It's a highly evolved risk assessment system.
Yeah.
So to understand this shift, we are diving into 6 core psychological reasons for it, starting with a really counterintuitive truth.
Which,
Why that breathless, youthful fantasy was actually a necessary psychological survival mechanism.
exactly. We have to stop seeing that early love as just, optional romantic idealism. It was a crucial structural utility.
So let's start there. The first big idea. Youthful fantasy was a psychological lifeline. It was a necessity born from a feeling of lack.
Yeah, if you look at the psychological context of being young, it's really defined by a massive lack of control.
Right.
You have limited autonomy, a very limited understanding of how the world really works, and you're just surrounded by these huge unknowns: career, money, who you are, what intimate relationships even are.
That level of uncertainty must breed a kind of constant low-level anxiety.
And loneliness.
A shapeless anxiety, yeah.
It tends.
Loneliness. So love wasn't just some pleasant diversion. According to these sources, it was assigned this enormous, almost structural meaning. It was there to fill all those gaps.
So love becomes this instant channel, a mechanism to pull yourself out of that feeling of being powerless or confused.
Precisely. If you didn't have control over your life, you could at least feel like you had control over the narrative of your love story.
But wait, let's push back on that for a second, because I think for a lot of people listening, that might sound a little reductive. Doesn't that sort of suggest that young love isn't real love if its main job is just an emotional escape route?
That is a really important question. It doesn't mean the feelings weren't real. It just means the intensity of those feelings was inflated by the need state around them. And here's the big aha moment our sources point to.
Okay.
Sometimes even painful love was preferable to the existing reality.
How on earth could pain be preferable? Because when you're grappling with that nameless anxiety, those unresolved chronic dilemmas of real life, say, the stress of family dynamics or financial worries or just the pressure of figuring out who you're going to be, that's a kind of shapeless horror.
Right.
A painful romance, no matter how messy, was actually better because it was pain with a plot.
Pain with a plot. I like that. So the brain would rather deal with the defined danger than just this vague, undefined threat.
Absolutely. The youthful self could point to a clear villain, a specific drama, a finite heartbreak. That feels manageable. It gives your emotional system a focus.
Instead of just staring into the void of 5 years of career uncertainty.
Exactly. That shapeless emotional labor is infinitely harder to process than, say, a dramatic text message argument that at least defines the problem for you. The fantasy provided a structure for the chaos.
So the intensity of youthful love was really a reflection of the depth of the psychological void it was filling.
That's the synthesis.
Not necessarily the inherent quality of the love itself.
That's it. Fantasy burned so easily back then because psychologically you needed that structure and that escape more desperately than you needed safety or stability.
But then, life happens. Experience starts to pile up, and those intense psychological needs, they start to stabilize. They mature. So if fantasy was a survival mechanism back then, what lessons did life teach us that allowed us to finally let that necessity go?
And that brings us right to the shift. The cognitive realizations that undermine fantasy's absolute power. This is the heart of the transformation. We found 3 really critical realizations that fundamentally change the wiring of the mature heart.
Okay, let's walk through those one by one. What's the first one?
The first, and maybe the most brutal one, is realizing that love, no matter how profound or passionate it feels, does not solve fundamental survival problems.
Yeah.
It won't pay your bills, it won't fix your health issues, and it's not going to negotiate a better job for you.
A necessary grounding. Okay,
Yeah.
so what's the second realization?
That there is no such thing as complete rescue inside a relationship.
The white knight idea.
The youthful fantasy really holds that the right person will just swoop in and make all the heavy lifting of your self-management just disappear.
But the mature heart learns you still have to show up.
You still have to do your own emotional work, manage your own existential burdens. Your partner is a supporter, they're not a savior.
And the third realization is the big one. It's the structural conflict, the thing that fantasy just cannot beat.
This is the death blow for that pure destiny narrative. It's the realization that passion, no matter how fervent, cannot perpetually resist structural realities.
Can you give us an example? Are we talking about like leaving socks on the floor or something much deeper?
Oh, it's much deeper. It's realizing you might share every core value, but one person's dream career means being stuck in a high-cost city, while the other needs the psychological space of, say, a remote mountain town.
Or one person needs to save aggressively for retirement right now, and the other needs to take a huge entrepreneurial risk to feel fulfilled.
Exactly. No amount of pure love can fix that kind of structural mismatch in needs, or geography, or financial security.
So once we understand these conflicts, fantasy gets stripped of its necessary status. It's not essential anymore. Our sources call it optional emotional seasoning.
And this is where the brain executes its major defense system upgrade. You mentioned it earlier. This transformation is often mislabeled as cynicism, but it's really the establishment of what we call rationality as a defense system.
A defense system.
Yeah.
Okay, help me understand the mechanics of that. What is the mature brain actually defending itself against when a new spark appears?
It's defending itself against the cost of misplaced hope, of wasted time, of emotional wreckage.
Boy.
When the youthful heart felt a spark, it immediately jumped to commitment. When the mature heart feels a spark, it automatically engages in risk assessment. Before those romantic feelings are allowed to just unfold freely, the brain says, hang on, I know what this costs.
So it starts mentally calculating the potential consequences, the conflict zones.
We are effectively paying the bill up front, mentally, instead of letting that bill arrive 3 years down the road.
Which makes every feeling of destiny immediately
Yeah.
cautious. But what are the specific signals the mature mind is now looking for when those sparks start flying?
We learn to treat our own emotional responses as clues, not as commands. The mature mind knows that a fast heartbeat often comes with a loss of control.
So the rush might feel like destiny.
But the brain registers it as a potential boundary dissolution, or maybe even an urge toward codependency.
And what about that intense, immediate sense of idealization, that sort of blushing face response?
That intense, immediate idealization, it might signal projection or misplaced needs, maybe some deeply rooted dependency issues, or just a frantic need to escape your current reality.
Wow.
Knowing this makes it incredible.
And that mental cost-benefit analysis, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It connects directly to the external pressures of adult life, which literally reduce the space we have for that kind of emotional extravagance.
Precisely. We call this the squeeze. Modern adult life physically restricts the psychological room you have for reckless fantasy.
Let's get tactical with that. If your brain is constantly stressed by mortgages, career maintenance, family demands, how does that daily grind actually squeeze out romantic imagination? What's the cognitive link?
The link is what you could call psychological leeway. When we're young, we have this significant emotional runway, all this spare mental bandwidth to process uncertainty, to analyze ambiguities, to build these elaborate fantasies.
But once life gets consumed by what the sources call unavoidable matters,
Mortgages, work deadlines, the health of loved ones.
the brain's priority shifts entirely to just managing stability.
Exactly. So if you're trying to manage a tight family budget and a child's intense schedule, your brain has zero spare capacity left to analyze why some new person sent a slightly ambiguous text.
Or whether they're your true soulmate.
Forget about it. The emotional system automatically goes into energy conservation mode. Any fantasy that does not directly enhance survival stability is automatically pushed to the background.
So it's a resource reallocation.
Guided by evolutionary necessity, your brain prioritizes resources for threat detection and stability management, not for creating emotionally risky fictions. It's not that you stopped being romantic. Your cognitive load is just too high to support that level of ungrounded emotional spending.
So if the capacity for love itself doesn't disappear, what specifically does? The sources are really clear on this. It's the adolescent heartthrob psychology that vanishes.
The structure of love changes completely because the emotional budget changes. Youthful love is defined by reckless, absolute commitment, pushing emotions to the limit, and having the ability to treat your partner as the entire world.
That's a high-energy firework.
It is. And that requires a level of psychological energy that the mature brain either doesn't have anymore or, more likely, intelligently refuses to allocate.
And what replaces that volatility? How is adult love defined when stability becomes the main goal?
It's defined by quiet companionship, reliable responsiveness, and critically, a sustainable temperature.
A sustainable temperature.
Yeah. The mature heart is looking for a steady, dependable hearth, not a volatile flame. Adult love no longer aims to stimulate the nervous system and send your heart rate soaring.
Its evolved purpose is to
Stabilize the heart, to provide a bedrock of emotional safety from all the unavoidable anxieties of life.
That concept of a stable temperature brings us perfectly to our final segment, and this is the good news, right? Fantasy hasn't vanished entirely. It has just evolved. It's refined itself to match the stability the mature heart now needs.
And this is so important because people often fear they've become boring or, incapable of romance because they can't fantasize anymore.
When the truth is,
They've just intelligently abandoned the grand, impractical themes that caused so much damage in the past.
okay, so what are the big ones that get lost? The fantasies we finally let go of because they just proved too costly.
The sources list 3 primary fantasies that are almost universally dropped. First, the fantasy of rescue, that they'll swoop in and save you from your own life struggles.
Right.
Second, the fantasy of destiny, that you were meant to be together regardless of actual effort or compatibility. And third, the fantasy of uniqueness, the pure soulmate concept.
The one that guarantees any small conflict feels like proof the universe got the mailing address wrong.
Exactly. The moment you realize arguing over the thermostat proves you aren't one soul.
That dramatic interpretation just fades away.
But the vacuum isn't empty. We replace those grand, dramatic narratives with new, far more grounded, and frankly more effective fantasies that align with genuine adult needs for safety and stability.
So what are these grounded, mature fantasies that are left?
They're simple, but they're profound because they're based on reality, not fiction. Mature romantic desire now centers around fantasies of being profoundly understood.
Meaning your partner recognizes your unspoken anxieties and limitations.
Yes, and fantasies of being treated gently. That deep relief of knowing your vulnerability isn't going to be weaponized against you.
And the last one is huge. The fantasy of being chosen seriously.
Meaning someone who sees the costs, who sees your flaws, who assesses the risk, and chooses you anyway.
What's fascinating is just how practical these new fantasies are. They're not about fireworks anymore. They're about emotional safety. What does being chosen seriously actually look like in action?
It's the difference between being chosen in a moment of, intoxicated passion and being chosen when you are at your lowest.
Okay.
When they witness a moment of your deep anxiety or a professional failure or a family crisis, and instead of backing away because of the complexity, the partner leans in.
It's a choice made with full awareness of the costs.
Which makes that choice infinitely more meaningful than some grand declaration of destiny. These mature fantasies are less dramatic, sure, but they are so much closer to the actual requirements for a sustainable, reliable partnership.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you move forward? If we step back and synthesize all this, the core takeaway is that the reduction in romantic fantasy isn't emotional decay. It's not a move towards cynicism.
It is a psychological, structural transformation.
You didn't lose the capacity for that heartthrob feeling, which I think is a really common fear.
You didn't. What you successfully moved past was the stage where you had to rely on fantasy to survive, or to create a narrative structure for your emotional life. You just don't need romance to be an escape route anymore.
It's about acknowledging that the volatile heartbeats that are suitable for 18 and the sustained, reliable temperatures that are suitable for 30 and beyond